under the brilliant amber sky of the Serengeti at sunset, as hot winds carrying the scent of burnt grass swept across the wilderness. Our story does not begin with the thunderous roar of the king of the jungle. It begins with a painful whisper of fate. On a stretch of parched, cracked, and lonely land, miles away from the protection of the pride, lay a small, pale yellow figure. That was Amara. At only 10 weeks old, the lion cub was now but a faint shadow of a predator, exhausted from hunger, severely dehydrated, and trembling with a fear so deep it had turned into a deathly silence. When she was found, Amara looked more like a pile of ash than a living being. Her eyes were dull, no longer reacting to the light or sound around her. When Dr. Julian Vance, who had dedicated his life to decoding the language of wild species, first knelt beside her, Amara did not growl or bare her teeth. She only cowered, a frail resistance against the horrific trauma that had stolen her family and her faith in life. Longtime rangers looked at the skeletal frame and shook their heads with a sigh, believing Amara's soul had departed long ago, leaving only a body fading by the hour. But Julian was different. In the terrifying stillness of the wild, he saw a flickering light, a fragile but proud breath hidden beneath the matted fur. This was not merely a medical rescue. It was a journey of patience and sacrifice to convince a predator that amidst a cruel world, a peaceful harbor still exists. This story will take us deep into the moment a quiet act inside a cold iron cage turned the destiny of a wild heart forever. For the first 10 days at the Mara Wildlife Sanctuary, the atmosphere surrounding the isolation area was heavy with tension. Amara was placed in a special recovery room, a sturdy iron cage with a concrete floor and cold metal bars. Although those bars were built to protect her from external threats, to the shattered soul of a lion cub, they felt like a prison for both body and spirit. Dr. Julian and his team worked tirelessly, administering fluids and vitamins through the gaps in the cage to combat severe malnutrition. Physically, Amara gradually stabilized. Her ribs no longer protruded sharply, and her coat began to regain its natural color. However, the emotional connection remained completely severed. Amara spent 24 hours a day pressing herself into the darkest, deepest corner of the cage. The rigid concrete floor offered no comfort, and every sound, from the clinking of buckets to the footsteps of medical staff, echoed in the narrow space, making her tremble violently. Every time a bowl of food was pushed through the small slot at the bottom of the door, Amara would hiss with a raspy breath. It wasn't the powerful roar of a monarch, but the sound of absolute terror, a desperate defensive effort. She refused to eat. The fresh red meat, full of nutrients, lay there untouched, cold, and attracting flies in the sweltering afternoon heat of Africa. There is a heartbreaking reality in wildlife rescue. Sometimes you can save the body, but lose the soul to psychological freezing. Julian knew that if Amara did not start eating on her own, her organs would fail again, and this time, no miracle could save her. The sanctuary staff began suggesting more aggressive interventions, sedation and tube feeding. It was the standard procedure for animals with severe psychological trauma, but Julian hesitated. Night after night, he sat on a wooden crate outside the cage, observing her under the dim security lights. He realized that to Amara, this cage was just another place where she was trapped and helpless. She didn't see Julian as a savior. She saw him as a jailer, a tall creature, standing upright, carrying the scent of chemicals and controlling every door. To save Amara, Julian knew he had to break that hierarchy of fear. He had to stop being a doctor, standing outside, observing a patient, and become a companion, sitting with her in her pain. He realized that the pain of a lion cub is no different from the pain of a human. They need more than a roof or a meal. They need a witness to their suffering. Julian decided that the next morning, he would do something that went against every safety rule in the manual. He would stop trying to treat her from behind the bars. He would open that heavy cage door and step into her world, leaving all human authority at the threshold. The following afternoon, when the sanctuary was bathed in the stillness of the break hour, Julian performed an act no one expected. He brought no medical kit, no sedatives, and no protective stick. In his hands were only a small folding chair, a book, and his own lunch. As the iron latch clicked, a dry metallic sound that always panicked Amara, Julian slowly stepped inside. He did not look at Amara, did not call her name, and did not approach her. He chose the furthest corner opposite her, set down his chair, and calmly began his lunch. The space inside the iron cage was already narrow, and now it became even more suffocating with the presence of a human. For the first 20 minutes, Amara was like a statue of horror. Her tiny claws scratched lightly on the concrete as she tried to press herself deeper into the back wall, her amber eyes wide with vigilance. Julian maintained absolute stillness. He focused on his sandwich, occasionally turning a page of his book, keeping his body language completely relaxed and non-threatening. He was signaling in the most primitive language of animals. I am busy with my own business. I'm not hunting. I'm simply existing with you in this space. Julian's acceptance of sitting on the dusty floor, sharing the same cramped and cold air with Amara, created an invisible vibration. He didn't stand from above, looking down. He lowered himself to the eye level of a wounded creature. Then a breakthrough occurred. It started with a very slight flick of Amara's ear. Gradually, she stopped tensing up. Her tail, which had been tightly curled around her body, began to loosen. Julian's scent, not the smell of disinfectant, but the scent of a living being at peace, seemed to help Amara calm down. Julian took a piece of unseasoned fresh beef he had prepared specifically and gently tossed it into the space between them. He didn't follow the meat with his eyes, nor did he look to see how Amara reacted. He went back to his book. 10 minutes of silence passed, with only the sound of the wind blowing through the iron bars. And then a faint sound emerged, the soft padding of a big cat's paws on concrete. Amara crawled forward, belly low to the ground, inch by inch toward the meat. She quickly grabbed it and retreated to her corner to eat. For the first time in weeks, the iron cage was no longer a place of pain and coercion. It had become a space of connection. Julian felt a surge of emotion in his throat. By stepping into that cage, he had proven to Amara that he didn't come to dominate or control her, but simply to be with her. The moment Amara accepted the meat was the moment the iron bars in her soul began to melt. It was no longer a relationship between doctor and patient, but a resonance between two living beings finding each other in the darkness of fear. Trust, once ignited, must be tended like a small flame in the wind. Over the next month, the lunch ritual inside the iron cage became an indispensable spiritual anchor for Amar's recovery. Julian no longer needed the folding chair. He sat directly on the concrete floor, letting the dust cover his clothes. Amara no longer fled to the dark corner when he entered. Instead, she began sitting in the middle of the cage, watching Julian with an intense curiosity in her amber eyes, which were now clear and full of light. Her physical transformation was miraculous once her psychological burden was lifted. Muscles began to show beneath her sleek golden fur, and her gait regained the fluid, rhythmic grace characteristic of a great cat. Amara started making chuffing sounds, a soft exhale that lions used to greet pride members. One afternoon, Amara did something that made the sanctuary staff watching from a distance hold their breath. She slowly approached and gently rubbed her head against Julian's knee. In the wild, this is the ultimate sign of acceptance and belonging to a family. Julian kept his hand still. He respected her wild nature, but the connection between them at that moment was stronger than any words. However, this recovery brought a new challenge. Amara was growing too fast for the cramped space of a recovery cage. Her predatory instincts and the need to run began to urge her. Julian understood that the purpose of these bars was to save her life, but now they were beginning to restrain her. The team began the process of rewilding Amara, moving her from the narrow iron cage to a much larger fenced area with tall grass, bushes, and large boulders characteristic of the savanna. The day Amara stepped out of that iron cage for the last time was an emotional milestone. Julian stood watching from a distance, intentionally creating space so she could learn to rely on her own strength. It was a bittersweet feeling. Julian had spent months being Amara's entire world within those four metal walls. But now, his greatest measure of success was that she could live well in a world without him. Amara began to learn how to stalk ground birds, how to navigate through thorn bushes, and how to listen to the breath of the land. She was no longer the cub cowering in the dark corner of a medical shed. She was becoming a maiden of the plains, majestic and full of life. Her eyes no longer reflected the ghosts of the past, but the vast African sky where she truly belonged. The iron bars receded into the past, giving way to the freedom calling from the horizon. The day Amara officially returned to the embrace of the greater Mara was a morning flooded with golden sunlight, a light that seemed to bless a journey of rebirth. When the door of the transport crate was lifted, Amara didn't bolt away immediately. She stepped out with an unusual calmness, her paws touching the wild soil of the savannah, the place where, not long ago, she thought she would perish in solitude. Amara stopped and turned her head to look at Julian one last time. It was a deep, lingering gaze, an unspoken tribute to the man who chose to sit with her on the cold concrete when she was nothing but skin and bones. Then, with a powerful leap, the golden silhouette vanished into the green of the brush. Amara's story teaches us a profound lesson about how we face the brokenness in this world. We often mistakenly believe that great problems always require loud and powerful solutions. We think we need to fix everything with authority or complex systems. But Julian and Amara showed us that the greatest transformative power in the world is sometimes the simplest silent presence. By choosing to step into the iron cage instead of watching from the outside, Julian dismantled the walls of fear that medicine could not touch. He reminds us that whether it is a traumatized animal or a friend going through dark days, sometimes the best thing you can do is not to give advice or try to change them immediately. The best thing you can do is bring your lunch, sit down beside them, and let them know they are not alone in the darkness. Today, Amara has become a proud adult lioness, the mother of healthy cubs, contributing to the survival of her species in this African land. She is living proof that no one and no living being is beyond repair. A heart, no matter how shattered, can be mended if it is placed in a space that is safe enough and filled with patience. To those following this story, thank you for being part of the journey to spread hope. If Amara's journey has touched your heart, please share it, because doing so helps us gain more resources to support sanctuaries that give a second chance at life to wild souls. And I want to ask you one thing. Is there someone in your life who needs you to sit in the iron cage with them today? Sometimes, your presence is the only medicine that can heal everything. Don't forget to subscribe to continue accompanying us on journeys to explore the wild world, and click the bell icon so you don't miss any stories of connection. Until next time, always keep your kindness and keep your soul as free as the birds of the great wilderness.